So we have a quorum. We're good to go.
Okay, so I'll just check with the broadcast team. I'll be right back.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Raven, we're ready. You can start as soon as you're ready, sir.
Okay, I guess I'm ready. Well, thank you. Good morning. My name is Ricky Raven, and I am chair of the Agency Operations Committee for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. It is currently 9 a.m., and I would like to call the April 23rd Agency Operations Committee meeting to order. This meeting is being held via conference call. Please be aware that although we are meeting via conference call, this meeting is still being broadcast via the internet. So at any point, those staff members who are attending in person may be visible to those watching online. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome those joining us via conference call and ask that they observe the following etiquette. 1, please state your name before you speak. 2, mute your phone when not speaking. And 3, keep background noise to a minimum if you can. Members, we will begin with a roll call to ensure that we have a quorum. When I call your name, please respond to confirm that you are on the call. Mr. Javed Anwar, Mr. Cody Campbell.
Here.
Dr. Fred Farias.
Present.
Ms. Emma Schwartz.
I'm here.
And we also have other members on the call who are board members, but who are not members of the Agency Operations Committee. Our chairman, Chairman Stuart Stedman.
Yeah, here.
Sam Thorne.
Here.
Donna Williams.
I'm here.
Welcome Wilson. Here. And the Commissioner of Education for the State of Texas, Harrison Keller.
Here.
Thank you all. Good morning to you all. The first item, the first agenda item is approval of the minutes from the January 22nd, 2020 Agency Operations Committee. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
This is Emma. I'll move.
I have a motion made by Ms. Schwartz. A second?
I second.
A second by Mr. Campbell. Members, I will call your name. Please state whether you are voting for or against. Those in favor may say aye. Those opposed say no. Mr. Campbell?
Aye.
Dr. Farias?
Aye.
Ms. Schwartz?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. The next item on our agenda is public testimony. We do not have anyone registered to testify publicly today, so we will go to the next item. The next agenda item is a report on grants and contracts, including those exceeding $1 million. This item does not require any action. Members, the reports were included with the materials that you received prior to this meeting. Mr. Bill Franz, General Counsel, and Ms. Linda Natal, Director of Contract and Grant Management, are available if you have any questions. Does anyone have any questions for either Mr. Franz or Ms. Natal? Hearing none, we will move on then to finance. Our next agenda item is an update on loan program payments and bonds. This item does not require any action. Mr. Ken Morton, Assistant Commissioner for Financial Services, also our Chief Financial Officer, will present this item to the committee and be available for questions. Mr. Morton, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Since March, we have seen a substantial decline in economic activity at both the state and national levels due to attempts to contain the spread of the COVID-19. We've also seen the resulting substantial increase in unemployment. With the College Access Student Loan Program being a standalone enterprise, Finance has implemented additional actions to monitor the market, loan cash flow, and loan default rates. These include biweekly meetings with our financial advisor and bond counsel, as well as creating additional weekly reporting and enhanced cash flow modeling. I will provide a brief financial overview of the program as it stands today and the projected future. The program currently has $51 million in loan funds as a reserve. These funds are not tied to any bonds that we have issued. These are above and beyond that. The debt service fund, which we use to pay our outstanding debt, is a separate account and has $183 million in the account as of the previous week. This is enough cash to make the August 1st debt payment of $81 million estimated and also have $100 million remaining. At the end of each year, fiscal year, we are required to have the following year's debt service in the account at that time. So before the year starts, we're required to already have all the cash to make our following year debt payment, which our debt service amount is approximately $14 million. Our projections right now for cash between now and the end of the year is to have an excess above that amount of $20 to $30 million, which will increase the reserve account to $71 or $81 million. This assumes the current slowdown in economic activity continues to hold flat. Now, obviously, if we do see a substantial uptick, economic activity increases, we could see a boost again back to normal on loan payments. How long this protraction in economic activity will last and how much the default rate will increase is uncertain at this time. As we know, there are a lot of individuals unemployed as a result of the close down in businesses. Again, if we assume that these businesses at some point will be back in operation, then we can assume that the unemployment rate will go down. Now, what we don't know is how long, how protracted this will be, or will this bleed into other industries and other items that will continue to increase the unemployment rate. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Board members, do any of you have any questions for Mr. Martin? Hearing none, we will move on to internal audit. Thank you, Mr. Martin. The first item under internal audit is an update on internal audit reports and activities. This item does not require any action. Members, these reports and activities were included with the materials that you received prior to this meeting. Mr. Mark Pell, Director of Internal Audit and Compliance, and Mr. Paul Mayer, Assistant Director of Internal Audit and Compliance, are available if any of you have any questions. Good morning, Mr. Pell and Mr. Mayer.
Good morning, Mr. Raven.
Any questions for either of these gentlemen? Hearing none, we will move. Thank you, gentlemen. Hearing none, we will move on to the next item. The next item is a discussion of statements on auditing standards, number 114, then auditor's communication with those charged with governance. This item does not require any action. With us is Ms. Susan Warren, audit partner with Kpmg LLP, will present this item to the committee and be available for questions. Good morning, Ms. Warren.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Raven and committee. I also have Shannon Canals on the phone, who's the manager on the engagement.
Excuse me, Ms. Warren, we're having trouble hearing you. Could you...
Is that better? I'm on a landline.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I apologize. All right. So this is the planning discussion for the August 2019 audit. There was a PowerPoint, so I will step through that. The second page of the PowerPoint just gives you the agenda on the right. Just reintroduce you to the team, talk a little bit about our audit planning, and then for those of you who have been through this before, there are some questions at the end which require your input basically into the planning process for the audit to help us identify any potential risk that we may not be aware of. Slide 3 is the team. Susan there, that's me, of course, and then Shannon is on the phone. We have other team members, a second partner, an actuary, and our IT director, who are part of the management team as well. And those people have all been on the engagement for 2 or 3 years now. Slide 4 is honestly another agenda summary, is the way we put our deck together. So I'm going to skip over to slide 5, which is the details. So we do have some risks that we have identified, and when we say risk, there's always business risk, but Kpmg and the accounting community try to put those into buckets of risk, because these are what we call our more significant risks. And one mandated by the standards is management overrider controls. it's something that can always happen. Of course, there is a spectrum of the risk associated with that, but we are required to let you know that it can happen in any entity. And as you can see here, if that were to happen, it would be more of an instance of fraud. We do have two other estimates that we've looked at. Of course, the allowance for doubtful student accounts, and as Ken just mentioned, with the economy the way it is, that type of thing, that'll be something we'll have to look at a little more closely at as a subsequent event. But we do have the estimate there where we look at management's methodology to determine what's not collectible as of August 31st. And then, of course, the IT system, of which you guys rely on quite a bit for your controls, both on the Helms and the MIP side, are in scope, and that's why Chris Stone, the IT director, is on the account to audit those systems. Moving to the next slide. There are other significant audit areas. So now we have the significant risks. These are the more significant audit areas, the things you would expect. Student loans, debt, and, of course, covenants, compliance with those debt covenants, the financial assistance expenses going out to the universities, and, of course, the appropriations coming in from the legislature. So we do look at all of those, and the risk there is really more of a risk of error, not necessarily fraud, although fraud can happen. But the more significant thing would be just an incorrect recording of a transaction. Slide 7 is materiality. This just tells you kind of what it is and what it's not. In summary, materiality is our professional judgment where we determine certain thresholds that essentially drive the nature, timing, and extent of our audit procedures. Said another way, if we're sampling an area and we have a lower materiality, then that takes our sample size to a higher number. And so materiality is based upon where those risks are. So we would have a lower materiality potentially in an area like an allowance versus something that's more of a routine transaction like paying your vendors. And so materiality is based upon the context, helps us drive our audit procedures and the extent of work we need to do to issue our opinion. Slide 8 does require me to let you know that, as I mentioned, Kpmg is on the account. He's the actuary specialist. You're probably wondering what that is. So there's GASB 68 and GASB 75, where the state of Texas had to record their pension liability and their OPEB liability, so other than pension plan benefits. And a portion of that gets allocated down to the coordinating board to be on your financial statements. So we do have to look at that allocation process from the state as a whole down to the coordinating board to make sure it's reasonable, and our actuary is looking at those assumptions that relate to that. Slide 9 is just an overall kind of timing of the audit. The January and April, we are nearing the end of that, which really is the planning session. And then April and May is where we're actually doing our audit work. So we started, I think, a week and a half ago, and we actually have started finishing our planning. We're moving into our controls testing. The IT work is probably 90% done, and then we'll move into our substantive procedures the first part of May, end of April, first part of May, and then plan to issue our report and report back to the July AOC meeting. Very similar to the prior years from a timing perspective. Slide 10, these are the responsibilities. I will summarize these. Manager's responsibilities is to create the financial statement, including any adjustments. In the other box, they basically are required to give us all the information we need to do to substantiate the audit. And at the end of the engagement, they sign a representation letter, which essentially says they've given us everything and answer our questions in a truthful manner. The AOC's responsibility is to oversee this process. Slide 11 also says that the AOC has a responsibility for setting the proper tone at the agency. Kpmg's audit objective is to put an opinion on these financial statements. Our responsibilities include us following all the different auditing centers that are listed in that box. And then the bottom box tells you that there is additional information in your financial statements, like supplementary schedules, things like that, that are outside the normal of balance sheet and income statement. Our responsibility is to look at those to make sure they make sense, basically that they tick and tie to the balance sheet and income statement, and note that in our opinion. Slide 12 and 13, these two slides are a potential list of all things that if we find them in an audit, we are required to let the AOC know. A few of the more high points here, if we find a significant matter like an unusual routine, something of that nature, noncompliance with any type of law, If we find control deficiencies where something in the IT system didn't work, or, for instance, if we found management override that we talked about, we'd be required to report that to you. Slide 13 indicates that we would also be required to report any suspected or known fraud to you if we were able to find that from that perspective. Slide 14, as I promised, is a slide where I do need to have some input from the committee members from a planning perspective. So the first question, is anyone on the phone aware of any possible violations of laws or regulations that we would need to discuss offline? Hearing none?
The record reflects you heard none.
No.
Okay. Second and third questions together. Anyone aware of any fraud as it relates to a coordinating board employee?
No.
None.
Okay. The fourth question is one for the commissioner and I to just have a plan of protocol. So what the number 4 is saying is if during the audit we find something that is of an unusual nature that we believe you need to know about before July, we like to have a protocol in place as to how to communicate that. Generally, there are 2 options. We would talk to the AOC chair or potentially call a special meeting. In the past, you guys have asked us just to reach out to the AOC chair and let the chair make a decision about how to communicate to the rest of the board. Just wanted to know if you wanted to continue that protocol or if you wanted to change that this year.
This is Fred Farias. I would recommend that as the past years we've done that, and I would recommend continuing doing that.
Okay. Duly noted. Number 5, this is talking about allocations of responsibility. So what we're getting at here is if you've changed the signing authority or basically given the management team more authority or less authority during the fiscal year 19, we would just ask to basically, are you aware of that so that we can make sure that we've updated our records and understand the reasons behind it.
There's been no change, I think.
Okay. 6, any particular business risk that you guys have been deliberating that you are concerned about with regard to the 19 financial statements?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. 7 is kind of a catch-all, but anything outside of the things we've just talked about where you're concerned, you want us to take an extra look, something that warrants particular attention on your part?
This is Emma. I just have one comment there. In 2019, the coordinating board saw a significant change in staffing and management.
Yeah.
As usual, I don't have any particular concerns with that, but years of big change, just sometimes keeping that in mind, that change sometimes causes errors or miscommunications, et cetera. Not that I know of any.
Understood. And to address that comment, that is a potential area for risk. We have acknowledged that, and so there are several places in the audit where we have taken our materiality down to make sure that we would see anything of a significant nature.
Thank you.
You're welcome. 8, any significant communications that the board has had to vote on with regard to regulators. This would more than likely be like the IRS or possibly the SEC with your bonds, but more likely a bond rating agency, anything like that that you've had to deliberate and vote on.
None that we're aware of.
Okay. Number 9 is internal controls. So any concerns you guys have about how the financial statements are put together and the accuracy of the numbers?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. And 10 is a catch-all. It says any developments that you guys have had to make changes in your financial reporting, any new laws, any general corporate governance changes, anything like that that you think that we need to be aware of to calculate into our planned approach to ensure the financial statements are materially correct.
None that we haven't previously discussed.
Okay. That is the end of our required presentation. Are there any additional questions that we can answer for you?
Thank you, Ms. Warren. Board members, do you have any questions? Hearing none, we move to the next item. Ms. Warren, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The The final item under internal audit is a discussion of the state of Texas federal portion of the statewide single audit for the fiscal year ending August 31st, 2019. Report number 20-317, issued March 2020 by the Texas State Auditor's Office. This item does not require any action. Members, these materials were also included with the package that you received prior to this meeting. We have with us Mrs. Bhakti Patel, principal from Clifton Lawson Allen, is available if you have any questions. Ms. Patel.
Yes, thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Patel? Hearing none, thank you, Ms. Patel. We will move to compliance monitoring.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is an update on compliance monitoring reports and activities. This item does not require any action. Again, these materials were included with the package that you received prior to this meeting. Again, we have Mr. Pell and Mr. Mayor are available if you have any questions. Any questions for either Mr. Pell or Mr. Mayor? Hearing no questions, we will move to the next item. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and attention. This concludes the Agency Operations Committee. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Campbell. Do I have a second?
Second, Fred Farias.
Second by Dr. Farias. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar?
Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Anwar. Let the record reflect that you were in attendance. Mr. Campbell?
Aye.
Dr. Farias?
Aye.
Ms. Schwartz?
Aye.
The motion passes, and I vote aye as well. The motion passes unanimously. We will now take a short break to allow staff to set up for the Committee on Academic Workforce and Success meeting, which will begin in approximately 5 minutes. Members, please remain on the conference call. Thank you all very much.